They expected me to lose myself completely, to forget not only names but the life I lived. Yet my memory held sharp edges. I remembered account codes, every login, and my lawyer's number. I remembered my son's broken wrist after climbing a tree and the way he wept when his father passed. And now, decades later, that same boy had filed court papers calling me incapable, all because I missed a phone call, all because I didn't respond to a group message. I sat in my chair, staring at the envelope stamped Rawl v. Rawl, petition for guardianship. A cruel word ward, as if I were something to be locked away. That morning, my daughter-in-law had written me a message. It's safer if the court manages your affairs. This isn't personal, we still love you. But there was no love, only a calculation, neat as a ledger finally balanced by erasing me. 3 weeks earlier they'd taken me to lunch, smiling, asking polite questions. I thought it was kindness. Now I see it was preparation. They wanted me to forget enough to feel the betrayal, but not enough to fight back. What they didn't know: I still checked my finances every week. I still kept documents from decades past. I still had a password book hidden where only I could find it. The hearing was 9 days away. I called my lawyer of 22 years. "Do you want to fight?" she asked. "I want to fight quietly and win loudly," I said. That afternoon I pulled every record, deed, and receipt from storage. It may have looked like an old woman kneeling at a box, but it was proof of a mind still sharp. They thought forgetting a call meant forgetting myself. But memory doesn't fade evenly. I may misplace a name, but I remember truths they'd rather I didn't. I remember who I am, and I will remind them. The first move had been made, and I'd refused politely. But they hadn't stopped. I sat across from my lawyer again. Eleanor had already pulled together property records, powers of attorney, and Alan's financial statements. She spread them across her desk like chess pieces. "This isn't concern," she said flatly. "It's control. They want the house." Of course they did. I'd lived here 47 years. Paid the mortgage with Henry's second patent. Repaired the roof myself after that storm in '92 when the contractor tried to cheat me. Raised Alan under this roof. Buried Henry's ashes in the flower bed. The deed had been in my name for decades. But after my surgery, I had added Alan's name, just in case. I'd never removed it. That was the gap he was exploiting. Now he claimed I wasn't capable of managing my own property. Eleanor leaned forward. "If the judge thinks you're frail or timid, they'll let this slide through. We need precision. We need edge." I asked her, "What exactly do I have to prove?" She met my eyes. "That you are still the same woman who once ran a business, managed 3 sets of ledgers, and fired 2 corrupt auditors in 1 week. I smiled. "Then let's remind them." Back home I called Charlie, my old accountant. He'd retired, but answered in his usual dry tone. "Do you still have those reports from 2015? I asked. "The ones you said made you want to hold your own hand in a hurricane." He laughed. "Still got them. Want me to send them?" Within the hour the files arrived. I printed everything, organized it neatly into a binder. Proof not only for court, but for myself. I wasn't a dependent. I wasn't a ward. I was the woman who once negotiated contracts in 3 countries while making dinner for a sick husband and restless teenager. That evening, Alan texted, "Hi Mom, just checking in. Don't worry about court. We'll handle the hard stuff." I didn't answer. My silence was part of their story. But not this time. The next morning, I prepared like it was work again. 6 a.m. tea, documents reviewed aloud. Not because I couldn't, but because I wanted to sound sharp, authoritative, undeniable. Eleanor arranged an evaluation with a neurologist, Dr. Benfield. She tested me thoroughly: memory, logic, reaction. Her verdict: "Your results are stronger than some medical students I see." She emailed me the proof. At home, I looked at my living room differently. A shrine to compromises, framed family photos where I was already fading into the background. I boxed up a few, then opened Henry's old cabinet. His medals. His uniform photo. He'd hate this battle, but he'd tell me the same thing he always did: let them make their play. Then make yours. That week I built 2 binders, one for court, one for after, one to defend myself, and one to take back everything slowly chipped away by polite smiles and veiled hints. The day of the hearing, I dressed with care. Navy suit, gray coat, Henry's necklace. My body ached, but I whispered to myself, not today. When I walked into Eleanor's office, she said, "You look like a woman about to argue with God." Only if he sides with my son, I replied. In court, Alan's lawyer painted me as confused, forgetful, unstable. He wanted the judge to see weakness. But what he didn't expect was me, steady, composed, ready to speak for myself. The judge reminded everyone, this isn't about punishment, it's about protection. Then Eleanor stood. Mrs. Rao is here to speak for herself. She has documents, medical reports, and testimony prepared. Judge Rafferty gave a nod. Let's begin with her then. Mrs. Rao. I rose, and that was the second crack. Because I didn't shuffle or falter. I walked with calm, steady purpose, as if the courtroom were my own hall. When I sat, I placed my hands neatly together and looked straight at the judge. Good morning. My name is Geraldine Rao. I'm 74 years old. I live at 261 Bramble Avenue, the house I paid off in 1998. I am the widow of Henry Rao and the mother of Alan Rowe. I am not confused. I am not incapable. I do not need protection. The judge inclined her head. Go on. For more than 50 years, I've managed my own finances. I ran a company for 23 of those years. My bills are current, my taxes have always been filed without error, and I have no outstanding debt. I've never harmed myself or others. My most recent medical evaluation is in your folder, Exhibit 4. I held it up, and I know who I am, and who is trying to strip that from me. The room went still. Alan shifted. Yes? I forgot my grandson's graduation date. Because I wasn't invited. I called my daughter-in-law the wrong name. Because the woman who visits me weekly is Deborah, not the one who leaves pamphlets about retirement homes on my counter. Context matters, Your Honor. Alan jumped up, but the judge cut him off. Sit down. He obeyed. I opened the binder. Here are my bank records, log and history, password updates, all managed personally within the last 30 days. I have revoked my son's power of attorney. I have revised my will and placed my estate into a trust under someone who has never treated me as a burden. The judge leaned forward. Do you know why your family filed this petition? Because they expected me to forget a password, I answered. They were waiting for time to dull me, so they could call it decline. But I'm not slipping. I'm exhausted. Exhausted from being valued only when convenient. From paying for dinners I'm not invited to. From being seen as a balance sheet instead of a mother. I'm not confused, Your Honor. I'm finished pretending I don't see what's happening. The judge studied me for a long moment. Thank you, Mrs. Rao. You may sit. I returned to my seat. Alan kept his eyes forward, his jaw locked tight. Thelma leaned in to whisper, and he pushed her away. Another crack. When the ruling came, it was brief. Petition denied. Mrs. Rao retains full authority over her affairs. No credible evidence of incapacity. Case dismissed. I didn't smile until we stepped outside. Until Eleanor finally let out the breath she'd been holding, until the autumn air brushed against my coat. Only then did I allow myself to breathe deeply. That evening, I heard the tires on gravel. One short press of the doorbell, like he still believed he could walk in without asking. Alan stood there, tie gone. Shirt creased, holding a paper bag. I brought dinner, he said. I stepped aside just enough for him to enter. He placed the bag on the counter as if it meant reconciliation. Maybe we could talk, he said. I poured 2 cups of tea, because habit is hard to kill, and set one before him. Then talk, I said. He shifted uncomfortably, searching the room like it had changed. It hadn't. I want to apologize, no rehearsals. I cut him off. Say it real, or don't say it at all. He swallowed. We were worried. You seemed distant, excluded. I corrected. Not distant, excluded. He nodded slowly. Thelma thought we needed protection. Protection from whom? From me. Silence. Then, finally, the truth. We thought if we waited long enough, you'd forget more. It would feel natural. There it was. The quiet betrayal spoken aloud. You wanted me to fade piece by piece until I was grateful to hand everything over, I said softly. But I'm not grateful. I'm awake. He lowered his eyes. Maybe we can start fresh. I looked at him, my son, once a boy with muddy shoes, now a man who tried to erase his mother. No, Alan. Fresh starts require trust. And you shredded that with ink and paper. His shoulders sagged. So what now? Now you leave. And you think about the price of what you tried to take. Not just the house, not the accounts. He left with the bag still in hand, dinner untouched, apology unopened. I poured his tea down the drain. The next morning, I pulled out a key I hadn't used in 6 years. Henry's handwriting labeled it office back. I slid it into my pocket and locked the house behind me. Driving across town, I saw how the roads had changed, buildings replaced, but when I turned onto Briar Street, the red brick building still stood. My old company. Sold years ago but never erased. Inside, the receptionist smiled politely. "Can I help you? Tell Davis Reynolds that Geraldine Rao would like a word." Within minutes, Davis appeared, stunned. "Mrs. Rowe, I'm not a ghost," I said with a smile. He hugged me, awkward but genuine. We sat down, shared tea, and I told him plainly, "I want my old records. Property deeds, purchase histories, equipment transfers. Proof that what I built was mine, not my son's. Not theirs, mine." Davis didn't pause. "I'll have everything ready by Monday." I gave a firm nod. "Good. I'll also need a letter on official stationery confirming my continued advisory role, even if it's informal. They've tried to paint me as retired, disconnected. That story needs correcting." He tilted his head. "You want proof of your involvement?" I smiled. "Not involvement. Authority." We spoke another hour. He offered lunch, but I declined. Too much warmth would blur the edge I had carefully restored. Before leaving, I wandered through the old operations hallway. The storage room door stood open. A young employee was unpacking boxes. She startled when she noticed me. "Oh, sorry. Did you need something?" "No," I said quietly. "Just measuring the weight of the air." She didn't understand. That was fine. Some things aren't meant to be explained. On the drive home, I passed the strip mall where Alan once worked summers in college, bagging groceries and saving for books. He used to return home flushed with pride, until the day he declared he wanted a different future. I had told him simply, "Then build it." Strange how he forgot that lesson when it came to me. Back at the house, I made soup, simple, warm, and sat with my own pile of binders. I added Davis to the witness list, underlined property origin, title transfer, post-retirement activity. I wasn't piecing together a case anymore. I was reinforcing a spine. That evening the phone rang. For a moment I almost let it go. But the name wasn't Alan's. It was Lydia, my oldest friend, my compass. "Jerry," she said. "I heard about the hearing. I've been trying to call. I've been trying to remember who I am," I replied. "And did you?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "Then let's not waste it." We spoke for an hour. We laughed, cried a little, remembered the women we had been before life reduced us to background characters. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet kitchen, palms wrapped around a cooling cup of tea. I wasn't a ward. I wasn't a burden or an account to be managed. I was a woman who had built, endured, and decided for herself. And I wasn't finished. 2 days later, the notice arrived tucked among junk mail, hearing postponed, rescheduled in 14 days. I sat on the porch steps holding it. Not relief readiness. 2 weeks wasn't delay, it was opportunity. The next morning, I called Eleanor. She listened, then said, "Good. Use the time. Build weight. We already won in court. Now let's win in silence after." I knew exactly where to begin. Last month Thelma had shown up with coffee, something she only did when she wanted leverage. She lingered by the bookshelf, staring at the framed house deed Henry mounted after we made the last loan payment in 2003. "You know," she said casually, "it might be smart to put this place into a trust, just to make things easier if decisions need to be made." I had smiled then, but not kindly. "Easier for who?" I asked. She laughed, but her eyes stayed locked on that deed. What she didn't know was that the tiny recorder Eleanor had once gifted me had captured the entire exchange. At the time, it had been more habit than strategy, but now it had purpose. I called Eleanor. "I have a recording. Not illegal, but revealing." "Good," she said. "We'll have it transcribed and filed as context." That afternoon, I called Richard, my banker. He still treated me like a former CEO, not a fading relic. "Richard," I said, "I'm ready to finalize the trust. All assets, yes. Everything, except one small personal account. And full discretionary powers to Catherine Rao." He hesitated. "Your granddaughter. The only one who's never asked for anything. The only one who visits simply to say hello." The paperwork began that same day. My fortress was nearly complete. That evening Catherine called. Not about the trust. She didn't know. "Grandma," she laughed, "I tried making your cinnamon cookies. They turned out terrible." "You used margarine, didn't you?" she gasped. "How did you know?" "Because I'd never write a recipe that works with margarine." We laughed. And she told me about her new job at an art gallery, long hours, little pay, but hope. That thing missing from this family for too long. Before hanging up, she added, Dade's been trying to reach me a lot lately. Something feels strange. Just be yourself. I told her. That's all I need. The rest of the week, I gathered support, letters from old colleagues, even one from a former city commissioner who remembered how I never missed a contract meeting. Even with a broken ankle and a sick husband, I filed it under character, competence, continuity. 3 days before the new hearing, I visited Henry's grave. Just a simple stone, no plaques, no benches. I'm almost done, I whispered. Then I'll rest too. That night I cooked my favorite meal, roast chicken. Mashed potatoes, gravy, not for company but for freedom, alone but not lonely. By then every detail was secured, bank, property, legal standing, intent, everything. The hearing would come, but I had already won. On Sunday, Catherine arrived unannounced, just as I liked it. She brought groceries she didn't need and cookies from a gas station. I remembered you hate being asked if you need anything, she said. So, I brought what you don't, I smiled. You've always had better instincts than the rest. We sat at the kitchen table. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask if I was managing. She just waited, quietly, patiently, like she knew I had something to say and was willing to give me the space to decide when. So I did. I said evenly. I set up a trust for everything I own. Her eyes widened just a little. You're the beneficiary, not in name only. You'll have access. Not today, not all at once, but in time. The house, the savings, the patents, the returns, they're all included. Grandma, she began, lifting her hands slightly. Are you sure? I've never been more certain. She leaned back, studying me. Why me? I took a slow sip of tea before answering. Because you never asked. Because you never made me feel like a safe waiting to be cracked. Because when you visit, you sit at this table as my granddaughter, not as someone rehearsing for the reading of a will. Her mouth lifted into a quiet laugh. That's probably the kindest thing anyone said to me. It's not kindness. It's the truth. She sat in silence for a while, then asked, What's really happening, Grandma? Dad won't stop texting me. Thelma even called. She never calls. They keep telling me family should stick together, that we shouldn't let outsiders interfere. I don't know what that means, but I think I do. They tried to take it all, I told her. Not loudly, not violently, carefully. They filed for guardianship. They wanted control of the house, the money, me. Her hands froze. Why? Because I'm 74 and quiet. Because I missed 2 calls. Because they thought that meant I was slipping. And because they assumed I wouldn't resist. But you did. I am. I handed her a folder. Inside were the bank records, the trust registration, the notarized forms. If anything happens, you call Eleanor Reed. She'll guide you through everything. But more importantly, don't let anyone, not Alan, not Thelma, not anyone with my name or yours, decide who you are or what you owe them. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the papers. Grandma, this is too much. No, I said. Too much is what they've asked of me for years, while reminding me I was lucky just to be included. This, I tapped the folder, is balance. She nodded slowly, then reached across the table and took my hand. I won't let them touch it. I promise. I know, I said softly. And you won't let it change you. Not a chance. But we sat in silence, 2 women with the same features and the same earned stillness. She reminded me of myself at 25, not in clothes or voice, but in the way she looked at people, without cruelty yet without illusion. I'd buried that piece of myself under decades of being useful. Now I was digging it back up, placing it into her hands. As she left, she paused at the door. If they come for you again, they won't, I said. But if they try, I'll be ready. She smiled. Can I bring you something next time? No. Good, she said. I'll bring it anyway. After she was gone, I folded the tablecloth and placed the folder in the drawer by the sink, not hidden, just close, where a hand might reach when it needs something solid. I wasn't giving away power. I was restoring a legacy, not of money, but of clarity and strength. The morning before the hearing, I woke early, not from fear, not from habit, but from readiness. The house was silent. Even the floorboards, which usually groaned, held their breath. This was the last day of uncertainty. Tomorrow, everything would be clear. I made tea but didn't drink it. Instead, I spread every document across the dining table: bank statements, notarized trust, transcript of Thelma's words, letters of character, medical reports, property history. My life laid out in paper. I read each one aloud. Then I logged into my bank account, typed the new password Henry's Hand 74. It opened. I navigated every tab, downloaded files, exported spreadsheets, took screenshots. Not because the court required it. Eleanor would handle that. But because I wanted it burned into my muscles. I wanted them to see I hadn't faded. At 10:15, I met the notary at the bank. Richard had prepared the last instructions, how the trust would function if I became incapacitated, when Catherine would gain full control, how no emergency access could ever be granted to other relatives. I signed each form. The notary, a small woman with sharp eyes, said softly, "I wish more people did this before things got messy. I wish fewer people made it messy in the first place." I replied. By noon it was done. I reheated soup, ate slowly, ignored the phone buzzing with Alan's unanswered calls. Later, I went upstairs and opened the cedar chest. Inside was the navy dress I wore to Henry's retirement dinner. High collar, fitted sleeves. I'd kept it, not for nostalgia, but because some clothes carry proof. I tried it on. It still fit. In the mirror, I didn't see an old woman gearing up for battle. I saw someone finally ending a conversation that had dragged on too long. The one that whispered, "You owe us. You belong to us. Your life is just what we allow you, not anymore." I pinned Henry's silver bird, the one he gave me when our company passed $1 million in revenue, at the collar. Not for show, for memory. At 4 p.m., I printed my remarks, 2 pages, plain words, fact after fact. That night, I placed them in the navy folder Eleanor had given me years ago, shoes beneath it. No last-minute scrambling. Before bed, I looked in the mirror, not to check, just to witness. I saw a woman underestimated by her own blood. A woman told, again and again, to shrink, to yield, to step aside. I hadn't. I'd sharpened. Tomorrow they'd see what that looked like. The courthouse smelled of dust and recycled air. The kind of cold that clings to places where verdicts are made. I passed security. Eleanor met me just inside, sharp. "Calm. They're already here?" she said. "Good," I answered. "Let them wait." The courtroom was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was larger now. The first hearing had been noise, betrayal. This one felt precise, like a scalpel. Alan and Thelma sat 2 rows ahead, whispering. Alan looked sure of himself. Not because of facts, but because he thought he'd exhausted me. That's how this works, not one blow, but slow erosion of dignity. But they were wrong. I hadn't thinned out. I'd hardened. At 9:03, the judge entered. Same woman, same glasses on the tip of her nose. "Let's proceed." Alan's lawyer rose, practiced smile tight at the edges. "Your Honor, we are here out of love and concern, not to diminish Mrs. Rowe's personhood. But observable changes, memory lapses, difficulty with technology, confusion, suggest a decline. These aren't accusations but patterns. There is no shame in aging, but there is risk in ignoring it." I glanced at Alan. He wasn't sad. He looked like a man balancing books. The lawyer continued. "My client has documented instances of missed calls, forgotten details, and sudden changes to estate planning without consultation. These concerns are valid." Repulsed. "False." Then Eleanor rose, her hand flat on the table. "No one denies Mrs. Rowe is 74. What we deny is the assumption that age equals incompetence. That silence means confusion. That independence must be re-earned yearly. We will show Mrs. Rowe is capable, deliberate and targeted, not protected, by those closest to her. This case is not about safety. It is about control." The judge nodded. "Proceed." They called witnesses. A neighbor who said I sometimes forgot my mail. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years who claimed I seemed quieter. They tried to recast privacy as weakness, stillness as frailty. I didn't flinch. I wasn't there to react. I was there to end it. When the judge called my name, the room shifted. I stood folder in hand, shoes steady on the tile. "My name is Geraldine Ruth Rowe," I began. "Born 1949. Homeowner for 47 years. Co-founder of a packaging business in 1972. Retired in 2004 with a minority share and continued advisory role. I still receive statements. I am not retired from myself. That matters." She nodded for me to continue. 2 months ago, my son and his wife filed papers asking to take over my money, my health choices, and every legal decision. They claimed I was slipping, that I'd become distant and confused. What they didn't mention were the patterns I had built, the routines and records that made their claim impossible. I held up the first document. This is a notarized log of my banking activity. Passwords updated within the past 30 days, Logan's Track 2-step verification, all done by me, no one else. My lawyer stepped forward, handing copies to the judge and their attorney. I went on. This is a transcript of a conversation in my home. My daughter-in-law suggested I should prepare to transition control of my estate. She called it gentle. I call it the first attempt to erase me quietly. Another paper passed across the table. This is a medical evaluation from Dr. Benfield, a neurologist with no connection to me or my family. Her conclusion: no evidence of decline. I let the silence rest for a moment before I pulled out my laptop. They say I can't manage online banking anymore, that I forget how to log in. Let's test that. I typed my 12-character password, steady, without pause. The screen lit up with my name, my accounts, every number in its place. I clicked through, showed the timestamps, then closed the lid. I am not fading. I am not lost. I am here. The judge's expression barely changed, but I could feel the shift, the difference between hearing words and believing them. I've also placed everything I own into an irrevocable trust, I said. Property, savings, investments, even intellectual property. The sole beneficiary is my granddaughter, Catherine, the only one who has never treated me like a fading page. Stamped, signed, and notarized. The trust documents were handed out. I didn't do this out of spite, I said. I did it because no woman should have to prove her right to her own life. Not in her home, not in her name, not in a courtroom against her own family. I folded my hands, calm. Certain, that's all. The judge studied me before speaking softly. Thank you, Mrs. Rowe. When I sat down, my son looked at the floor. My daughter-in-law froze, her face caught between anger and disbelief, like someone realizing the story they wrote no longer belonged to them. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I hadn't logged into a bank account that day. I had logged back into myself.